We are live.
We are live.
Live, are
Question
we?
mark. Hey. All right, everybody. Welcome to DGG Presents Random Encounters. We're joined, as we have been previously, by our friend Brian at Bjark the Bard. I am having issues with words today, but there's a reason for that, and we'll get to that in a little bit.
He may be a bit flustered.
A little bit on the just riled up. Also, for Dawn and I, we got a bunch of snow today.
Oh yeah,
And
and it's
so
supposed to keep going all night.
Been on like snow removal multiple times for home and work, so
All night.
little excess energy going on right now. But yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining us. We have a few topics involved, including, we're not going to start with it, but we are going to talk about safety tools a little bit. As any of you, at least in the Twitterverse, have probably seen the discourse coming around again about the safety tools, kind of centered on a consent checklist, which we will look at and touch on later. But before we dive into the first topic, Brian, give them a hello and a where to find you real quick before we...
Yeah, sure. So I am Brian. I go about in the various spheres online as Bjark the Bard, and I write over at bjarkthebard.com, where I share everything that I have learned over my time as a DM. Some of the lessons I have learned the hard way, and help you improve your abilities.
We've made the mistake, so hopefully you don't have to.
Yeah.
So, coming up soon, hopefully within the next, I'd say 2 weeks, but we'll see. Definitely sometime in December.
Mm-hmm.
Brian is hosting on his blog a DM or GM roundtable discussion.
Yep.
And this is something we hope is going to be a reoccurring thing. A rotating cast of GMs is going to talk about different topics based on things like Twitter polls, suggestions on future articles, or things that are talked about in the Cove Discord channel. And that's where this was born too, was just, the collaboration of a bunch of creators being like, hey, this would be a good idea. And then Brian and I kind of took the reins once our other things calmed down momentarily, at least for us. And we're like, okay, let's do this. Let's make this go and see how it works. So stay tuned for that. The first topic of that roundtable is going to be pets and summons. And not to take anything away, for those of you that may have seen the podcast about Smoother Combat Part 1 and 2 that we did, also featuring Brian.
I may have opinions.
Dawn has opinions. Now, I'm going to make sure Dawn doesn't take over and, go on for an hour about summons. But we also don't want to take away from the content of the article.
Yeah.
So we're just going to touch on it a little bit, and we're going to talk more specifically about some of the summons in the game and thoughts, opinions, and effects that they have on the game and timing and things like that. So, just to let him kind of get a little bit out of the way to start with, Don, kind of give us your overall thoughts. Don't dive into any like mechanics or anything yet. Just give us your thoughts and reasonings, the rant-worthy part, the intro to the rant. Go. I'm
All
ready.
Right. Well, not to detract from the article or anything, but one of the things that we probably should have highlighted more is like there's a couple of things, especially in like say 5th or 5th edition D&D, that I think that Brian would probably agree on. There are things like the bag of tricks and summon woodland friends or animals or creatures or nightmares, as I like to consider it. The reason for this is because it starts to become a game of numbers, and most of the other players aren't involved unless you get creative. And the article glosses over quite a bit of that. What you all think? I'm trying real hard now. I'm trying super hard not to get into minutia.
I think you make a very good point, and I know at least looking at you've named a lot of the older 5e stuff, and the older 5e material out there in regards to summons was just so hard to run because of the amount of resources you would have to pull inherent to them. Like you said, summon woodland beings, where it's like, well, you might have a range to choose from. Well, you need to figure out the range. And, you'd have players with a little bit of experience under their belts. Would be like, oh, I have this list right here, and I've decided that I'm going to pull these 3 creatures, and this is how I'm going to go. And, that's wonderful. But you'd have other players that'd be like, hey, I just took the summon spell because I thought it would be fun. What can I pull with this? And screech into a halt as you're like, well, I guess we get out the monster manual and we're going to take a look at everything. And, well, you can't do this one.
And it really,
and it just,
it really, especially when they start asking for explanations of abilities or powers, because, yeah. And I know this is a common GM pet peeve, but when you play a character, it's best to at least have a solid foundation of understanding on what you're planning on doing. We're not asking for every detail. Like, it's impossible to master. Well, it's not impossible. It's unrealistic to have everybody memorize a spell list.
Mm-hmm.
But understanding some base foundations of abilities really help in that manner.
Yeah, it's...
But yeah,
I didn't let Don, I let Don rant a little bit in our combat podcast because of the problems that do occur.
Oh, I've seen
with it. And the article Don gives his methods for trying to kind of counteract. I shouldn't say counteract. His methods for how to handle it in a way that makes it efficient, not drag as much, and keep other players involved.
And that's the big thing, because you're going to see that at the table. If there's a lot of pets, there's going to be player disengagement, and keeping that pacing is really important in combat. Otherwise it becomes a war game, and a lot of people when they play D&D aren't looking to play a war game.
Yeah, entirely. And that's the issue I have mostly with summons and pets, is when it becomes an individual player's personal strategy game, when you have a group encounter going on, because I see a lot of times that kind of the teamwork starts to fade away when that happens. And besides what it does to combat in terms of slowing it down and action economy going out the window and everything like that, but you end up with a player that's kind of playing the game solo. And to me, that feels like one of the biggest issues that can come with some of the summons that bring a lot out onto the field.
Yeah, for sure. But some of the newer ones are pretty cool. Like, conversely.
They have done a good job with some of the newer ones for making it, one creature or one being, and they've outlined what it can do as part of the spell, and so that makes it easier to find it. The other thing is that rules as written, a lot of pets and summons and things, just rules, if you run it rules as written, it's going to bog things down.
Yep.
The prime example for me is wizards and their familiars, or anybody who has access to a familiar.
Yeah.
Rules as written, the familiar goes on its own initiative. So you might have the familiar going, one player, a bad guy, another player, a bad guy, and then the wizard or whoever has the familiar. And that just slows things down. And that's also, it's almost like one person gets 2 turns. And
or more.
Or more. And so, and I think some of the summons, it specifies that it goes on your initiative immediately after you. Or, some of the pets, it says on your initiative immediately after your turn.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is nice, is an upgrade. That's kind of where it should be. So I always do the same thing with familiars. Familiars go on the owner's turn immediately after them. and then that's a way to make it so they've only got one turn, and it truncates it and it doesn't break things up as much.
Yeah, it's almost turning them into powers as opposed to being their own thing.
Mm-hmm. And like it doesn't
Yeah.
take away from anything to do that. The familiar can still do what the familiar does. It's just makes the combat and makes the initiative order more efficient because you've got fewer steps in the initiative order.
Yep. Yeah, flow is everything in combat. Otherwise, like we were saying, it becomes a war game or a game of numbers where it slows things down. People disengage when it's just a bunch of math and difficult to follow because they're not quite sure what's going on after the 7th or 8th summon, and that's a little excessive, but I've seen somebody dump a bag of tricks onto a battlefield before, and that was a hard night.
So our combat podcast talks a lot about speeding things up and doing this, and the article has Don give a lot of good ideas about how to help as a GM mitigate and streamline this. And we also have someone that talks about like a pet, like a ranger's pet or animal companion, and different ways that can be used, in different ways that's good for the game and the story. So don't think we're all just completely bashing on pets and summons in this article.
No, they can make really interesting plot points and story, like depth of story, depth of world. Like, everybody loves that faithful companion that's next to the hero all the time. That's really important. But we also have to try to temper that with the expectations at the table that everybody gets their slice of the pie, so to speak.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I'm very excited to see the article get up and see everybody kind of react to it. Because like you said, we got the main goal was to have multiple sides
Precisely
in this. So it wasn't just one. It was a very rounded kind of thought process on the what we all had to think about it.
Yeah, and that is going to be the goal of the roundtable moving forward. Is we're going to show opposing viewpoints.
Yeah,
just to show different sides, because just because something is like one person doesn't like one thing doesn't mean it's not going to work well or be good for other people.
No.
So yeah, there's going to be
at least not always.
Yeah, at least not always.
Yeah.
There are some things that should predominantly be a no, which is actually kind of a convenient segue into topic number 2, which is why one of the main reasons all of us have a beverage of some kind handy.
Yep.
We're going to talk about safety tools in TTRPGs.
Let the controversy begin, which none of this should be controversial, but apparently it is.
That's a good way to say it. There's a lot of opinions out there about safety tools, using them, not using them. Are they good? Are they not? Different like that. And we are here to tell you, because we all have slightly different opinions, but we all agree that safety tools are a necessity for a tabletop RPG game, especially in this day and age when you've got people playing online and like GMs have never met players before. Players have never met GMs or other players before.
Yep.
Maybe you're with a group, whether you're the GM or a player, and nobody else. You've never met any of them before.
Yeah.
That's why these are so important.
Yeah.
And even if you're one of those people that's had the same table for 5-6 years, there's still a place for these safety tools.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, entirely. You never know what could be something here that maybe somebody has recently gone through and it's changed, but they haven't really brought it up with you or the rest of the table, because your table isn't really going to be the place where people want to share these all the time. I know tables can differ. You have some groups that you want to kind of share everything, but you have other groups where, and it might even be individual players, are not going to come in there and kind of share all of their experiences. They want to show up and they want to play D&D, and I think that's where the checklist, the consent checklist, really shines. Is you're not asking for anybody's life story. You're asking, are there things that you are uncomfortable with but you can proceed with? Are there things you don't want involved at all?
Now, before Don throws up the checklist, which will be one of the first things we talk about, I'm also going to let Don say a few words too. But I'm jumping in here just to remind Don and Brian to feel free to cut me off at some point if I start going on a rant and it goes too long or something else, or I just start repeating things that I just want to emphasize for different reasons, because this has got me real fired up. I'll get into the exact reason why a little bit later, but I'm real fired up about this. And like, I've kind of put the brakes on Dawn for the summons, and so I might need the brakes put on me for this one here.
No, I totally agree. The only thing that I would add, and I mean, both Brian and Jeff have covered the majority of the points. I'm just going to add a small example. I have known Jeff here longer than I've known my wife. That may not seem like a big deal, but I married my wife shortly after she graduated high school. So, I mean, we're getting close to almost the 20-year mark of hanging out. Or no, 30-year mark. Sorry. And still, no matter what, I always ask Jeff in any game that we're running if he needs me to send him a checklist. You know why? Because a lot can happen in a day. There's some stuff that people may not want to talk about that end up on that checklist, and that's fine. We don't have to understand. We just have to know that it's a boundary. And I think a lot of people get tiffed that they're like, well, why didn't they tell me about that? Maybe they can't. And so this puts it on paper, even anonymously. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll have players will be like, you don't have to put your name on this. Just send it to me, and I'm going to add all of them to a master list. And this is what everybody's going to see. And it's going to have my name on it only. Because some of that stuff is hard for people to even think about. And so that's the only thing that I wanted to add.
Yeah. And Don does do that. He because most of the time I tell him, nah, we're good with the checklist, because Don has known me for such a long time. But
I always ask.
Yeah, but he always asks. And it's just a quick check-in, because he's right. Things can change
in a day.
Something can happen, and that can make it a lot different.
Yep.
If you want to throw up the thing now, Don. But one of the things, this is at least a version of one of the checklists that's making its rounds in the Twitterverse right now. This is not the only form of this checklist. This is not the only style. There are many of these type of checklists out there.
This one's courtesy of Monty Cook, just so everybody knows. We didn't create this, but it is respectable and a good one.
Yeah. I don't see it showing up on the stream yet, though, Don.
Oh, hold on. There it goes. I forgot to push a button.
Yeah, it happens. But one of the things about the checklist is there is not one checklist that's going to work for every table or every game type.
Oh, absolutely no.
These are meant as a guide. There we go. That's the word I want. This is a guide, so you can either create your own or find another one out there that might, deal better with your specific game, or you can create your own.
Yeah, Google Forms is pretty easy to use, and you can keep it anonymous.
Yeah. And the same thing for if you're trying to have people submit these anonymously to you online, there are plenty of ways to set it up so it is anonymous and you don't know who sent you what.
Yep.
Because that's a big thing about these, is when they do come in, for a lot of people, it will need to be anonymous for them to give you an honest answer. And that is because you don't know everything about everyone's life that's going to be at your table.
Nope.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to focus on a GM perspective on using this checklist.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll talk a little bit about a player and filling it out too, I'm sure. But my main focus and my rant is going to be from the GM side and how it looks. But, this is something you need, because there are so many people out there that just will, if it's not anonymous, they're not going to tell you something that's a trigger for them.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of reasons for that. They're embarrassed, or they don't want they don't want you to know this about them. That those are just two. There's so many more reasons why they're not going to say if it's not anonymous. And sometimes it might It's if you're someone that has had, a life that has not had any major trauma in it, you're not going to understand. And it's okay to not understand, but not understanding is not a reason to not use it. And using this in your game does not make you someone's therapist. You are not being their therapist if you are the GM and you're using this in the game. Like it does not take anything away from your game to have someone say like, oh, like a good example is what Brian said earlier. Someone that was at his table for a game, and there was going to be a topic probably come up in the game about abortions or miscarriages, and they were dealing with the fact they'd had some. It's not somebody being weak.
Yeah.
It's not you being their therapist to have gotten that information or have that information
and
use it
respect
to
a boundary.
respect a boundary and
Yeah.
use that to remove something from your game to not suck someone off.
Yep.
And the things on this list are guides, and like punctuation matters, as you can see on the list here. Under the mental and physical health, there is police, police aggression, pregnancy, miscarriage or abortion. One of the things going around was the person that was set off by this was like, oh, what? We can't have police in our games now? We can't have a pregnant person at the table because that's offensive? And tell me you haven't read this fully without telling me you haven't read this fully. Like the punctuation, it gives you a topic and then it's going into what that topic is focusing on.
Yep.
And if you don't understand that police aggression is a problem for some people, open your eyes.
Yeah.
Look at the world around you. Like this is not talking about all police either. There are good police out there, like ones that do their job, aren't overly aggressive, do things, they exist. But that's not a lot of stories you see in the media because that doesn't get traction.
Yeah.
And
the thing is
what the media shows you is a whole different rant. But Don, go ahead.
I was going to say the thing is the reason why these are on the list is because either it bothers somebody because of a personal account or it's just something that they don't want to deal with in their lives. And it's not up to us to discount whatever experience they've had. As a GM, I think, at least for me, it's my job to go, okay, that's yellow or red. So I'm going to tiptoe around that or check in with the players at the table if this ever comes up. Most of the time, it'll just be implied or off screen because I like to try to keep the spotlight on the characters and not on the atrocities that the BBEGs are doing. I like to imply that they're occurring because that, to me, implied terror, I've always taken the adage from Hitchcock that implied unknown terror is worse. But, it's still, if you plan on putting anything with, Curse of Strahd, if you go through it and measure it against this, you're going to see a lot of things that you're going to have to ask players about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's so much.
It's the biggest thing for me is not discounting other people's trauma or want for an escape. And that's where I sit with it, when I look at those, I don't think, oh, well, why do they hate bugs or what's their problem with thirst or something? God knows what. It's not my part to know. Like, it's my job as a GM to go, okay, that's a boundary. Checking that off the list.
Yeah. I use this particular consent checklist for setup of Curse of Strahd. I made my own document for when I brought all my players the prospects of playing in Curse of Strahd, and it went over a lot of things, specifically how I was intending to run the game, what they could expect, but there was a section that talked about what Curse of Strahd as written can
like
present.
Old Bone Grinder.
Just to give them a heads up. So that got axed.
Absolutely.
In mine. Or well, it didn't get axed, it got altered because if you know. No Curse of Strahd spoilers, but there's a lot in Curse of Strahd that can get really dark really fast.
Mhm.
So going into that, I know that I wanted to kind of know all my players. I if you've read any of my stuff, if you've seen me online, I'm a big horror person. I love
Same.
horror. I love horror podcasts. I love horror movies. I love horror books. The biggest thing in the horror community is content warning. Um, because horror is all over the place
Yep.
out there, and there are certain tropes that will come up, specifically in different types of horror, and some of those just people do not want to be involved with for whatever reason. Maybe it's brings up a traumatic experience. Maybe it just is not something that they're looking for when they're reading. They want to have a good time. They want to be scared, but they don't want to
Mhm.
be made feel uncomfortable in that way.
Yeah.
So having those content warnings available lets you choose, like, oh well, I'm going to have to be careful because there's very explicit harm to animals in this
Mhm.
book. Do I want to continue reading it, or do I want to read it, or do I want to avoid it entirely?
Yeah.
And I think the same thing goes for TTRPGs, even more so because where books and movies are somewhat a passive media where you're
Yeah.
just kind of
Along for the
witnessing it,
ride.
watching it. With this, you're in it, you're involved in it,
Yeah. You're
and I
making
think that
decisions.
and it
Yeah.
takes it to the nth level. The
Yeah.
way that I like to look at it is, especially because I like to run horror, I want to make my players scared at the table, or I want to make the characters scared, but I don't want anybody to be uncomfortable at the table.
Yeah.
I want everybody to feel like this is a place where, nothing is going to like really pull them out of the situation and make them feel uncomfortable. So I can really focus on the things that will scare them and will drive the messages that I'm trying to do. And the
Yeah.
consent checklist, it's a tool. It's a very useful tool in making sure that I can do that.
Yeah.
And like running with the consent checklist, this consent checklist doesn't need to change your game significantly.
Mm-mm.
It may come to pass that because of this checklist, someone is not a good fit at your table.
That's
And
also possible.
that is the answer. And that is okay. That doesn't mean they need to be made fun of or anything along those lines, or talked about behind their backs as, oh, they're so weak, or why is this a big deal? No, sometimes things are just not a good fit. Like, I don't know a lot about the Spider Queen module, but someone who has a problem with spiders probably shouldn't play that module.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's like a very
Well,
Yeah.
that's a
yeah.
very simple thing, but that's the thing, is sometimes this checklist is just going to figure out that someone is not a good fit for this game, and that happens. This does not mean your game
Yeah.
needs to completely change unless you're seeing the same thing from all of your players.
Mm-hmm.
Then your game needs to change, or this is not a table you should run for.
Yep.
And that's not a knock
Yeah.
on you.
Yeah.
That's not a knock on the players.
Yeah.
Not everybody is a good match.
You're 100% correct. And one of the ways that I kind of run a measurement between what I'm willing to run versus what the other players in the table are up to running is I will go through and fill out mine first. And because for me, it's easier for me to just send it to all the players and be like, this is the kind of game I'm willing to run.
Yeah.
If these boundaries are boundaries you're uncomfortable with, then this won't be a good fit. Because there's some things I just don't do in my games. Like, there will probably never be graphic sex scenes in any of my TTRPG games. Because to me, it's just not a very fun or comfortable thing for me as a GM to portray.
Now, just to kind of
The 3.5 book
Yeah.
was weird.
Book of Wild Darkness? Yeah.
So to kind of expand upon that too, is just because Don sends out his checklist with stuff that maybe he has as green, that doesn't mean if that's not green for one or multiple players,
No.
that Don will not adjust for that.
No, I'm more talking about the reds. If there's reds that people are like, I can't deal with the fact that that's a boundary of yours, I'm like, well, then I guess we're not a good fit.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's standard consideration. Sometimes core values are different between people, and that's where you shake hands and walk away.
That was what I wanted to make sure was put in there, Don, was the difference between that. Not like, oh, this is green for Don, so if it's not green for you, you're out of the table.
No, it's all about the red boundaries, because the green is always negotiable. And that's something as GMs we should always work on.
Yeah, and I think that can be a little bit difficult. I know that's something that when I was a little bit greener to the hobby, I didn't really fully grasp, was that not every game is for me, not every table is for me.
Same.
And that that they're just going to be certain adventures that, for whatever reason, they're just not my cup of tea, and I need to understand that and know when I duck out. And I've run into players that don't really understand that, and it causes issues down the road. I know we say all the time that, no D&D is better than bad D&D, but I think until you really witness that firsthand, either being the one with the bad D&D or seeing somebody else having
and
bad
losing a player
D&D,
forever,
I don't think it really gets through your head.
Yeah. And like a way I like to kind of look at this and maybe present this that helps people understand is, you have, no matter who you are, you've had a lot of different teachers in your life, be it school, work, anything else you've done. Failure. Doesn't necessarily, well, actually, no, that could apply in this analogy too. But you have undoubtedly had a teacher you have learned better from than another, either in the same subject or a different subject. Different teaching styles, different learning styles exist. It's the same thing at a TTRPG table. Different GMing styles are not going to mesh with all players. Different playing styles aren't going to mesh with all GMs. And this is not a knock on one side or the other. It's just not a good mix. Just like one teacher can try and teach you something, or one trainer can try and train you in something so much and it just doesn't sink in. Or if you, as the trainer or teacher, are trying to like get it and it's just not coming across, and then somebody else comes in and is presenting the same material in a different way, and the person learning picks it up, or someone's presenting you that material in a different way and you pick it up.
Yeah.
And it just makes sense all of a sudden. Everybody can relate to that analogy in some way, shape, or form. And if you can't, you're not looking. I'm not usually about absolute. Time and time, that's something that exists. That's something I've seen time and time again. And yeah, it's just it's out there. I don't like to deal in absolutes, but this is one that I know everyone at some point in time, if they really think about it, has seen, has experienced.
You're not wrong.
And
usually the only arguments against that are cognitive dissonance.
And to be considerate and to have a little bit of empathy for people does not take away from the game. If anything, it's going to enrich that game, because if the players are comfortable, there's going to be a lot more buy-in, a lot more of them investing in the game, and it's going to make it that much better. If they're hesitant or uncomfortable, there's going to be less buy-in, less engagement, and that's going to make the game less enjoyable for everyone and seem more bland.
That's true.
And that's where this also helps to keep a comfortable table, to make it more fun for everybody.
Yeah.
It's just,
I think a lot of the counter arguments, I think a lot of the counter arguments are coming from a place where people feel like if they needed to hand these out to their friends, there's like a sense of betrayal almost. Like their friends haven't been honest with them. if that makes sense. I think that might be
Yeah.
the counter argument perspective, because if you're, if you're friends with a bunch of people and you've been running a certain way for years and years and years, and then you spend or send out one of these, and all of a sudden you get completely different results than you expected, and you'd have to change your game drastically. There's almost this sense like they don't trust you, and I think that kind of fear is what's driving the counter arguments.
Part of me can understand that, but at the same time, if you're strong enough to handle these things, to handle other things, and handle everything on this list, you should be strong enough to realize everyone has shortcomings.
Exactly.
Everyone has shortcomings. Everyone has things that they're weak at. Everyone has things they can improve upon.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just don't.
No, I understand where you're coming from, my dude. It's just, I think that it's informative to understand that, and I've been running and playing this game since second edition was popular, back when we all got beat up if we talked about D&D in public. And I will say that if somebody handed out a sheet like this when I was younger, it would have made me way more comfortable and less apprehensive to join groups, because I knew then what I could expect from the table. And from a player perspective,
I think it's just refreshing to see if everything comes back. So keep going.
Okay. I was just going to say that, there he is. Yay! And I was just saying that I think that as a player, if somebody would be like, hey, I have this consent handout, that would make me way less apprehensive to join a random anonymous table, because it means that the DM or GM, whatever system it's going to be, Call of Cthulhu, World of Darkness, what have you, is going to take the time to set up content based off of the boundaries that we've set in place. And for me, that means that joining the table is going to be a lot less of a barrier to entry from a player perspective. That's just me.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I can think of, and I won't go into any specific details. I can think of a lot of times when I was a young green player, and I went along with a game where the DM told me things that were going to happen, and I might not necessarily have been comfortable with them.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of went along for a variety of reasons. One of them being, well, I want to stay at this table. And it doesn't make for a good time. It makes for a very uncomfortable experience. And I mean, that's not what we're here to do.
Yeah.
And
it's a
also,
quick way to get people to stop showing up.
If you're such a great GM, you should see it as a challenge, or as a way to flex your muscle and your skills to be able to adjust your game to not accommodate some of these things, or to show it veiled or off stage.
This almost this almost sounds like the talk I gave you when I told you should roll all your stats in a line.
A little bit. It applies.
Yep. I
It's
challenge you to grow within the constraints you're given.
Mm-hmm.
As a DM or GM, I challenge you to do that by setting these rules in front of you.
It's only gonna improve. I don't care if you've been around these people for years. Maybe if you've been around these people for years, you have a different type of checklist to use, or a different safety tool.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the other ones out there is just there's multiple versions of it. There's a green, yellow, or red card, and an X or yellow card, things like that players can use. And these are really good for online games where they can just kind of throw them on the screen, or the virtual tabletop, to be like, hey, throw out a yellow card or something, to be like, hey, this is approaching something I'm a little uncomfortable with. Or a red card, be like, hey, this needs to stop now.
We use an X card, and I don't think we've ever had to use it,
but it's there.
And that's the thing, is I would much rather have it there. So that, makes me feel a bit better because I know as a GM I can get in the moment. Um,
Same.
and sometimes I can get really focused on certain areas, and I know the checklist, but maybe something comes up that you know starts straying into something that makes someone uncomfortable. That's
Yeah.
what that's there for, to give you a heads up. Say, I am not comfortable with the direction this is going. Either wrap this up or full stop. We got to stop this.
Yep. And that can, even if somebody fills out the checklist and they realize, oh, damn, this is something I probably should have, read it out or red card or X card. And in the midst of the moment, they have every right to be like, yo, we need to pause for a moment. Can I talk to you? And that should be it. Like, as a GM, that's part of our job, is to
Yeah.
hit the brakes and be like, okay, let's stop for a second and discuss, even if
And
it's one-on-one.
and as a GM, it's okay to throw down an X card yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If the players are going somewhere with their role play or something else that you're like, no, this is not something I'm comfortable running or being a part
Oh yeah,
of.
I've shut down whole games before.
Yeah, like it's okay as a GM to do that.
Yeah.
And if you have a player that throws down that as a GM, if you're the GM and the player throws down that card, it's also okay for maybe a game ends early, or maybe a game takes a 15-minute break
To have a discussion.
to a discussion as a table, or a discussion with that person in private.
Exactly.
It's a bathroom break, it's a snack break for everybody else while you take care of business and check in with that person. And another very important thing that we haven't really touched on yet is if these checklists are not anonymous or a player does throw down an X card, don't pry.
Nope.
You don't need to know why.
Yeah.
You may be like, well, I'm just trying to help and I want to help them. While that's honorable, there's a lot of situations where that does not help at all.
Yeah.
If they want to tell you and are comfortable telling you, they will in their own time.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of situations when people are not going to be comfortable with that, or they're going to be triggered and they just any talk about it, like they're okay to tell you in the future, but in that moment they're triggered and they can't talk about it.
Yeah,
It just makes it worse.
Down.
Yeah. So
yeah, exactly.
Do not pry or ask why in those situations.
I will say this.
Just
just
acknowledge it. Talk about, address the issue, or if you can't address the issue, stop that and move on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And but it is good to let them know, if you want to talk about this more, let me know.
Yep. I was just gonna say, it's also our responsibility as a GM, and hopefully this never has to happen to anybody who runs a game ever, but I've had to do it, unfortunately, a couple of times. And that's when somebody decides that either for whatever reason there's a boundary that's been broken, or what have you, one of the other players in the game starts getting aggressive about it, and it's our job as GMs to remove them from the table.
Yeah.
That's one of those, everybody gets one, you tell them to stop. If they haven't stopped, they're gone. I mean, that's a hard line that, as a GM, it's not fun, it's not glamorous, but when you're leading a table, that responsibility falls on us.
Yeah.
And any sort of hazing, teasing, making fun of, aggression from other players towards that player is just not okay. Even if that other player isn't there, that stuff as a GM you need to shut down.
Yep, exactly.
Don't laugh about it. Don't ignore it. Don't just not participate and let it happen. You need to take a stance and be like, that's not okay, or we're not talking about this, or this needs to stop.
Yep. Everybody gets one, and then it's over. Like, if that kills a campaign, it was worth it to protect that person. You'll find a different table. You'll find different players. It'll suck in the moment, but you'll get a lot of respect. And it'll be important, especially to the person who's being antagonized against.
And, in this day and age, people might comment against you if you're doing the things we're saying, but those are not people you want at your table or want to be at a table with anyway. Like, there's a lot of people be like, well, I'm strong enough to handle this. Cool. Good for you. That doesn't mean everybody is. You can't hold everybody to the same standard you hold yourself, because not everybody has lived the same life and had the same experiences.
Yep. But yeah,
You can't know.
no,
And
there's no way.
just
I don't know, this seems like a big downer, but this is a big responsibility that often gets glossed over in a lot of like D&D or GM or TTRPG talks. A lot of people don't like talking about it because it's uncomfortable, and it should be uncomfortable. Because, I mean, these things are very important. These are crucial core elements to how your table is going to run. And if everybody doesn't have at least similar core values about respecting boundaries, you are going to light a fuse to a time bomb that's going to ruin your game. It won't be the first session, but maybe by the time they hit level 4 or 5, it might even last to level 10. You never know. But there will be an explosion and all sorts of bad things will occur. So just hit the brakes on that kind of behavior immediately. Say that it's not welcome at your table. If they have a problem with that, they need to find a different table.
Yeah.
Give them that one warning.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with, if it happens once, it's going to happen multiple times, and dealing with that early will save you a lot of headache down the road, because I've seen situations where you see things early on and they get a pass because, oh well, the table's new, and everybody's getting to know each other a little bit better, and this is a new setup, and down the road it always ends up worse.
Yeah. And I've had friends that were great friends in real life, but you get them around the table and it was just this toxic cycle. And so there are just certain people that can't game together because of their personalities and core values, and that's okay. Grab a board game, something a little more structured. Then play some Descent. You'll be happy.
And another thing as a GM that kind of ties into these safety tools is pay attention to your players.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, maybe you didn't start the game with safety tools or a checklist, or maybe you did, but if something that's questionable or was in somebody's yellow, or even in their green, sometimes you like pay attention to your players. If something is drastically different with them, check in with them.
Absolutely.
Maybe something all of a sudden, like maybe you had somebody that didn't have a problem with, self-harm, and then someone they know self-harmed, or maybe they themselves self-harmed, and now it's a problem and it never has been before.
Absolutely.
That's just an example, but anything on this list and many other things, like the situation can change, and it's pretty easy to identify, if you pay attention to your players, if a play style changes or their energy or interactions change, especially if it's during a game.
Mm-hmm.
These are things to pay attention to, and you might need to pause, or maybe you need to take, call a break and check in with that person, or if it's online, send them a private message.
Yep.
Just to be like, hey, are things okay? And you don't need to know why, you don't need to go into depth, but just that check in, and hopefully they'll be like, yeah, we're in a situation that's not cool with me, and you can move past it.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to pay attention to the players, and if you don't have any video, or they're not around the table, listen to their voice, listen to their tone, listen to how they're interacting, or how much they're interacting, or consequently how much they're not interacting.
Yep. If they disengage and close down, it's a good time to do a check-in. Even a session 02. If you need to reskin a check-in as a session 02 and hand out new forms, do it. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Or should.
I think that that's perfect. It's a great time to just say, hey, like let's all catch our breaths, figure out where we're going, just kind of catch up, and it can take a lot of pressure off anybody in particular who might not want to share things, or might not want to be the only one
I
sharing
mean,
things.
life happens all the time. That's why I said everything can change in a day. So if you
Yeah.
notice drastic changes, or even at every major milestone in your game, even if you're doing just a quick episodic game to a full campaign, every milestone, send out more checklists, or just say, hey, do we need to revisit this and talk about it? Like, let's
and doing
discuss.
and doing that does not make you play the part of a therapist
I don't even
or
know where that came from. That's so silly.
ooh, or you're not like you're just trying to have a good table, healthy table, involved table, and have a good game.
Yeah.
And you also have to realize like one I think a common mistake by well-meaning GMs is they'll just kind of ask everyone at the table, "Hey, are things okay?" Like you notice one person and you're like, you ask the table and they don't speak up.
Yep.
It's a much different situation if there's 4 or 5 people involved and they say something compared to saying something to just you in some
Mhm.
fashion, private message or whatever.
Yeah.
That's why you can't just present everything to the table in general. Be like, "Hey, is this okay?" And take that at face value if it's something appears off. If something appears off, investigate one-on-one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like maybe your perception is just wrong and off. Cool. But if it's not and you don't check in, you may have lost a player or a game might derail or who knows what else.
Yeah. They
It,
have a
it,
tendency to grenade if it's not
yeah,
taken care of.
it takes nothing away
Yeah.
from you or your game or anything else to have empathy, to be considerate, to check in either in the middle of a game or in between games or anything. You're not being someone's therapist. You're not, coddling someone who should be stronger or anything like that. You're being a decent fucking. Oh, I don't know if I can say that. Sorry. You're being a decent human being.
Yeah. It's I don't understand the all the arguments against this. I really don't. I think I said before we got on the stream, like, it seems that there's just cycles where this comes up again, and every time I see it come up on whatever social media I'm on, I sigh and roll my eyes.
Yep.
Like, really, is this like this right here, this checklist, this is what just ruins the game for you. This is it. You can't play anymore because I have to tell people that I'm uncomfortable about bugs. Like, no, this is real. These are real things to people, and
Yep.
everything that we've said up to this point, like, you might know your players, but you don't know everything about your players. You don't know what might be uncomfortable to your players, and just uh,
It's like
Yeah.
Don touched on some people like maybe see it as a betrayal if they learn something they didn't know before. That's not what this is. It's like if someone's not telling you something that you've known for years, it's not because they don't trust you.
Nope.
There's multitudes of other reasons. They're embarrassed, they're insecure, they're worried about everyone's perception when they learn this about them.
Yep.
yeah.
Like it doesn't just it's another way to put this is it's not about you.
No, not at all.
Exactly. It's so easy to
It's not
internalize.
about you.
It's so easy to internalize something like this. I could see how somebody would be feeling that sense of betrayal, but it isn't about anybody. The only thing we're in control of, and I'm going to put my therapist hat on for a second, is our own thoughts, feelings, and actions. So, yeah.
All right. Any other safety tools we want to talk about? Because I feel like I'm going to start repeating myself on a bunch of things here and just going through it if we keep going on this one. I think I've expressed everything that
Well,
I've wanted
I
to
mean,
express.
really, I mean, if one that I really like is either the X card or the yellow and red cards are
Yeah.
great. But I like the X card, and you can just search the X card on Google. I mean, everybody's got Google. It's pretty easy to find. The guy who developed it did an amazing job explaining how it's used and what its relevance in games are. And It's a very useful, simple tool. If you don't want to use a checklist to keep track of everything, you GMs, just send everybody a link to the X card and be like, hey, we're using this just in case. That's all you got to do. I mean, really, that can save you a lot of time. Or if you get really fancy, like what I did when I was doing the first beta at Dire Straits, was I sent out a Google checklist because I wanted to make it a little bit more directly poignant to the subject matter, if that makes sense. Because I knew exactly what was going to occur, or pretty close. And it's like, hey, if you have a problem with your character's mortality suddenly or quickly ending, this is probably not the game for you. Things like that, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I think the X card or Google Forms is probably a good alternative to folks that don't want everybody to have to fill out a checklist and keep track.
You know, I feel like the people that don't like this consent checklist and stuff are probably the same people that don't do a session 0.
Oh yeah, they don't.
Yeah, they're the ones that are like, oh, session 0. Why do I need to explain things that they should already know? And it's just like, do you like having bad times?
I'm trying really hard not to get political right now. Trying so hard. Because I'm pretty sure the same folks that don't do session 0s are, yeah. Never mind. I'm gonna shut up now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get in
We won't
trouble.
go there.
We're gonna lose followers. And
So one thing I will add is if you are running a published module, like in my case, Curse of Strahd, coming up with a spoiler-free summary of some of the elements that will come up, specifically the elements that will frequently come up, and presenting them to your players in some format. You can go as fancy as a handout. I'm a big fan of that because I like to go a little extra with my campaign documents, or as simple as, hey, we're playing this game. It's Curse of Strahd. It's Gothic horror. Here's some things that can come up. You know, if we can, this can be something that we can discuss if you're uncomfortable with any or all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big deal. It's important because it makes the players feel safe. And if they feel safe, they're going to be more invested in your game.
Yeah.
And they're going to be less afraid.
Yeah. Less afraid of the things you don't want them to be afraid of.
Exactly.
Can't stress that enough.
Yeah. Like if this is the big barrier to you in making a very engaging game, well, I'm sorry, you might not be that very good at DMing or world building if you need these kind of crutches. And like you had said, Don, you can't work in a constraint.
Yeah.
And if you happen to be somebody listening to this at any point and you're at a table where you don't feel safe and you feel like you have to stay because it's your only option,
leave.
Drop us a line on here, on Twitter, on YouTube, on anywhere else.
Dig us up on Discord.
Brian, I'm like 100% confident without even talking to Brian. Drop him a line.
Yep.
If we can't run something for you,
we'll can find somebody who can.
We can point you in a direction of people that will respect your boundaries. Like Brian mentioned, like no D&D is better than bad D&D, but if you just really want to play and you feel like there's no way out, there's a way out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, always. And I've known a handful of people where they have been turned off the hobby for a long period of time, or turned off the hobby entirely because of situations like that. And I think that's horrible that, somebody mentions, oh, I had a DM that, I said I was uncomfortable with this and they told me I just needed to grow up. And at that point I decided that, tabletop probably wasn't for me. And I hear that, and it's
heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking and it's disappointing.
Yeah,
because that's not who we are.
No, I bet they would have been an amazing player too.
And
Yeah,
anybody that tells you you need to grow up or you need to get over it is
they're
not
dumb.
somebody you need to be dealing with.
Yeah.
And if you are someone that thinks that, I mean, you're probably not still listening to us at this point. But if you are, maybe it's out of a curiosity to figure it out. It's like, well, I don't have a problem with that. Well,
That's
once
fine.
again, you don't know everyone's life. Maybe like there are people that are, I don't want to say stronger than others. There are people that have had an easier time recovering from things than others have, or people
That's
who
true.
have gone through life and not experienced trauma.
Hmm.
And that,
Absolutely.
like, no one is less of a person for having experienced trauma and having triggers like this.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're all survival responses that are instinctual. And if you crack open any mental health book, they'll explain it. But if you're uncomfortable with that because you don't want to be their therapist, there's this cool thing that you can look up on Google. It's called empathy. Empathy is an amazing thing. And if you don't have empathy, even cognitive empathy, you probably shouldn't be running a game. That's all I'm going to say about it.
There are people out there who lack empathy or don't have any at all, and that is a thing. But
Hmm.
that doesn't mean you have to be a dick if that's you in any way, shape, or form either.
I mean, it kind of is.
just-
I mean, you just kind of like contradicted yourself there for a second.
I'm just
Even true sociopaths can learn cognitive empathy, which is a consequentiality of action. It's logical instead of emotional. It's a true thing.
there is a way to think
So
about these things logically and realize
yeah,
that
so
this is a
even for
thing.
those folks out there that don't have emotional empathy, there's hope. Just don't mess it up for the rest of us.
Uh,
Hey, I had to throw it out there. I mean, every time they talk about not being a therapist, I want to get deeper into psych stuff because it's funny to me.
And if you're someone who, like, honestly, it's probably better for me if I don't engage with these people and don't get like discussions or arguments about it. But sometimes I just can't help myself.
If they're around long enough to hear this, they might as well, because that means there might be hope.
yeah. If you stuck around this long, unless you really like listening to people that tell you that you're dumb, you're probably sitting here thinking, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this could be a great growing experience for me. And that's great. That's fantastic, because then maybe you aren't dumb.
Hey, I heard something that was really interesting to me, and it's if a person is speaking at from a point of hypocritical or hypocrisy, it means that they're in the midst of change. So even folks who are like, well, I want to respect people's boundaries, but I don't want to do this, they're in the midst of change. They're in the midst of realizing that, hey, maybe there's more to this than they expect. And so, I mean, if they stick around long enough, I'm more than happy to discuss opposite viewpoints with anybody as long as it's a respectful conversation. I'm not going to get into a shouting match with strangers, but if
Yeah.
somebody wants to talk logically about any of this, I'm here. So is Jeff. So is Brian, I bet.
Something that came apparent, we had a leadership training at work not too long ago, and one of the things the guys talked about was confrontation. Who's okay with confrontation? And there were two of us out of a room of like 20, 30 people that came up and stood in the area where said we were okay with confrontation. And like his first question to me was like, okay, why? And I'm like, I think confrontation and everything, I think it has a negative connotation to it to most people.
Mm-hmm.
Like confrontation doesn't have to be negative. A lot of growth can come from confrontation.
Mm-hmm. Good discussion and argument is key to growing.
Yeah,
I
and
would
so that's why,
argue.
that's why sometimes I do engage and do these things, is because that confrontation, even if it can affect one person and get them to look at something or think about something they didn't before, it was worth it. Like helping anyone grow.
Yeah, even if you're just moving that dial 1 degree, you've moved that dial 1 degree.
Yeah.
I'm also like, I have no problem speaking my mind, and if I think something's wrong, saying something or standing up for what I believe in. So
Yeah, I'm an introvert, but I'm also blunt, so it's kind of a weird combination. I'm an INTJ. I get away with being partially extroverted. Yeah.
you had something there, Brian, or
No, no.
Are you sure?
Like you had said before, this is just a topic that just it grates on me for a variety of reasons, and
Yeah.
it grates on me to the extent that I start to lose my my eloquence.
Mm-hmm.
We'll
No,
say that.
no, I understand
Just because,
completely.
as I said before, it just people that this right here
This is the hill they
is
want to
the
die
thing.
on.
This is the hill they want to die on. You're dumb. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
It,
I'm terribly sorry that you're this dumb.
it grinds on me the same way the banality of people who get in edition wars grind on me.
I remember being young and dumb.
Yeah. I remember when I used to be like, this is the right way, when in reality it's
Right?
like, hey, if your
Yeah.
table's having a good time, good for you, my dudes. Good for you. You're all
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Like, yeah, that's fantastic that you enjoy this. That's great. It's
Yeah.
not affecting my enjoyment of this game over here. That's fine.
There's
Enjoy it. I don't want to fight with you.
there's only two caveats to that. People who enjoy Fatal or My Farog, those people need to just go hide in their corner or something and feel ashamed.
oh goodness.
Yeah.
All right.
For those
So-
who are curious, feel free to look them up and you'll see why.
all right. So I think we're gonna move on
Yep.
from our safety tools a little bit here. I don't know if anyone's got any final parting thoughts, but as kind of a roundup. Well, Brian and Don think just in case there's something else. Safety tools necessary and good, regardless of how long your table has been together, of how well you think you know a person
Mhm.
or know about their life, and it doesn't take away from a game to do any of this or to put any of the answers or results into or out of a game.
Yeah. It also doesn't matter
Yeah.
whatsoever the duration of your session. It could be a one shot. It doesn't matter. Make sure
Mhm.
you have some kind of safety tool in place
I have-
because you just don't know.
Yeah, I have been a part of a few one shots for like charity streams or other things, and this got like this checklist or something else got used just to make sure.
Mhm.
Especially, the Halloween one I was a part of. It was a big deal just to make sure, and I put a couple of things on yellow, and the person's like, "Okay, so this is something that we're gonna look at possibly. Like, where's your
Where's the line?"
Like, and I was like, okay, yeah, like if we're
Yeah.
if it's talked about or slightly engaged with, that's fine. But I don't want to participate.
Yep.
Yeah.
And those are things like it didn't take anything away from the game, doesn't change the game. It just creates a better overall experience for everyone
Oh,
involved.
absolutely. It's
And
100% necessary.
And if you're such a good GM, having to make these changes should not be a problem for you.
Yep.
Flat out.
Exactly. Just like
Yeah.
what Jesse in chat just said. It all boils down to open and honest communication. Ignoring problems
Yes.
doesn't work out in the long run.
Sweeping
that
it,
is- Nail on the head right there.
sweeping it under
Yeah.
the rug or closing a door or something does not
No, it just lights the fuse.
doesn't help.
All you're doing is
Yeah.
pulling the pin or lighting the fuse and waiting for that bomb to tick down because it's going to cause a problem in your game. And it's going to cause
Yeah.
a problem with your relationships with these people. Because the unwritten rule of any TTRPG is you're all friends around that table, establishing relationships, whether or not you're strangers. You've decided to come together and make an experience together, which in a lot of ways is going to be a really deep experience, at least creatively, and that touches raw emotion. So if
Yeah.
you betray those raw emotions in any way by not paying attention to people's boundaries, you're going to ruin relationships, not just ruin a game.
That is fair, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take this wheel here and steer a different direction now before we risk beating a dead horse, because we all know, because it's this is just it's a hot button subject. I know why the discourse continually comes up, but also the majority of people on either side are not, unfortunately, not going to come to an agreement.
Nope, not
Or
until the
like, or
opposing
sign
force
terms.
dies of old age.
Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be the only thing that happens.
No,
At least not yet.
but it might thin it out a little.
All right. Now, moving on a different way. Today, we got a new 1D&D video.
It's every time we stream.
It
Right?
does seem to
Feel like
happen
it's
that way.
every time.
We stream
I
it. We're
saw-
getting ready to do it. We're like, oh, great. Now we have to read up on stuff.
That's exactly what I said when I saw it. I was like, oh, look at that. They've shut off a video. It's Wednesday. That's why they've shut off a video. It's the last Wednesday of the month.
So,
That's
folks, if you're listening, it seems like us and Wizards have the same like schedule.
Schedule.
Coincidence? I think not.
They're watching. That's our one mystery viewer. Wizards of the Coast are like, they're on to us. Quick.
So it was a video of just Jeremy Crawford talking to Todd and going over survey results from the first UA. They've compiled all that. They've got the results. They're working on that. And anyone that's interested or anyone that's filled out the survey to definitely go watch the video. It is like 38 minutes. There's a lot of good things in there that make me kind of excited. And also just realizing, okay, they're listening and looking at this feedback and they're doing stuff with it.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really great thing that they're addressing and putting in this video, being like, we saw what you said. And also, not only that, probably maybe the biggest thing in this video for me, and I'll probably have to listen to it again to be sure, but right now, the biggest thing in this video for me was Jeremy Crawford going over the approval ratings of different things.
Yes.
And what they do with that approval rating. Brian? Brian, go ahead.
That's I saw a couple people comment on the video and go, I would love to see the data. And like I was immediately like, I want to argue with that, but then immediately was like, I kind of want to see it too. That was like my second biggest takeaway was like Crawford explaining the process. I'm a sucker for seeing how the sausage gets made. I love it.
Oh yeah, I'm a systems nerd. I totally get that.
I love listening to him like explain like, well, like if it's like a 60% or lower approval, then we're going to want to look at this and we're probably going to want to change this. But if it's a 70% approval, then, we're probably going to do this. And it was just really exciting to see them kind of explain their process. The number one thing that I really liked was them talking about the sheer number of responses they have gotten on this. And that just, I know that's been something I have been on my soapbox shouting about since they announced it was just get out there and vote. I mean, sorry, get out there and return your survey. It's how you can get your voice heard. You can have a place in setting up the future of D&D. Your opinion matters. And it sounds like everybody really is leaning into that. And I think that's going to do a lot for the future of D&D.
Yeah, absolutely.
The comment was that they've received more feedback than they have on anything ever before. Like over 40,000 people interacted with the survey. And like 39,000 and some completed it. Now those are huge numbers, but when you think about the number of people that play this game, I think that's low.
Well, it's probably like the voter turnout. It's probably like 12%.
Yeah. And like I understand like it can kind of be daunting and maybe the survey takes some time or maybe but like don't feel like your voice doesn't matter in this. This isn't like, a presidential election where one vote is lost to the masses. When you're getting down to these numbers, one vote can take something from that 60% rating down into the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like
And
look at this. Go for it.
I was gonna say, and it just like get it, like formulating your opinion and just being able to put your opinion out there in a proper feedback format. It does so much to kind of you're putting your opinion out there. Somebody's going to read it, and it
Mm-hmm.
is going to be incorporated. And I think one of the biggest things is when you look at these things and you start to understand these things. Um, it kind of it's a learning experience for you where I know with a lot of the you with the I think it was with the second UA, the one that the massive monster of a document
Mhm.
was looking at some of these things and I was like, well, I like this. Why do I like this?
Mm-hmm.
What does this say in regards to my opinions on running D20 TTRPGs because I like this?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of interesting to see like some of the changes that I like that other people necessarily did not like as much.
Yeah, for sure.
And something that's a positive takeaway on top of them just describing what they do with the approval ratings, like knowing that having that knowledge for all of us is power.
Yeah.
Because okay, we know that if like a majority of us don't like something, we need to voice our opinion because if we get that approval rating low, it's going to go away.
Yeah.
Like that this encourages me even more so to do this because I know what the process is and how I can affect that process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the future UAs, sorry, Don, just give me a minute. Those
Mhm.
future UAs, they've already said they're going to make sure they're smaller than this last one.
Yeah, so they're more easily
So
evaluated.
more easily evaluated, more easily, dispersed, more easily consumed. So they're also showing us that they're learning from each one
Mhm.
as they go.
Yeah. No, all I was going to say is for folks that may struggle with their feedback and that sort of thing, one thing you can do is you can get the Grammarly browser extension for free, and it'll help correct some of the grammar and spelling issues. And if that's one of the barriers to your entry, it will help. It may not fix everything, but it'll increase the clarity of what you're trying to convey. And if that's something you struggle with, you can do it for free. Just attach it to your Google account and you're off to go. And it will check any form you fill. I just wanted to add that in there for folks that might struggle with any kind of spelling or grammar issues.
No, yeah, that's an
Yeah.
excellent tool to help with
Yeah.
that.
Oh yeah, totally. That actually kind of not necessarily Grammarly, but I use a different one. That kind of helped me break into writing because it kind of helped me with some of the common errors that I would make, and it definitely helps because you run it through that and it feels like it can do a lot if you are prone to having issues with your writing. And like you said, it's a good way to kind of up your confidence with what you're submitting to them.
Yeah, exactly. That way, because everybody has their own struggles, and there's nothing wrong with struggling with your own spelling or grammar. But if that acts as a barrier to entry on your feedback, grab Grammarly or anything that you can throw in that'll autocorrect it for you and just run with it. I'm sure that it could help build confidence for those folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess like the last kind of thoughts on one D&D stuff for this for me would be they've so sorry, somebody in the chat was like they found they can't justify the time to keep up with it to submit their one of 40,000 plus vote, and that's valid.
Yep.
If it's too much of a time commitment for you, that's fine. I 100% understand. I did not fill out the first survey. I'll out myself. It's fine. I don't care.
Mhm.
I did not.
I missed it, honestly.
Yeah. And, like that second one especially, I also did not finish. I'll out myself again.
That second UA, it was. I
was a
remember the
lot.
day it came out, and I turned to my spouse and I was like, "This just came out. I'm not
gonna
getting
finish
any
it.
work done today. I need to read this to completion." I was very happy when they were like, "We're not gonna make them this big anymore."
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, in reality, they should keep them like 4 to 8 pages, kind of like a quick start. If it's beyond 8 pages, people start to get a little leery.
Mhm.
Last
So,
one was 37.
Yeah, I'm still
yeah.
reading it when I have spare time.
Yeah.
To
And,
be fair,
it's a lot for people that have a full-time job, do things on the side, have
Yeah.
families. And, if you can't justify the time, cool. I'm not going to judge you for that. I
Mhm.
understand. Anybody that does judge you for that, forget them.
yeah,
They
for
don't
real.
understand, they don't get it. But like if you're just not doing it because you don't feel like your voice matters or because you're not sure how to construct feedback, there are ways to go about that. And the survey, maybe you don't have words to put feedback, but you can still put some information on there that's going to help. That's going to,
Yep.
give an opinion, help inform what's going on. So the next part that's coming out, they're going to have redone Dragonborn again with the results from what they got. They're going to touch again on the Ardlings, which they got a lot of comments about. And they're
Yeah.
also going to go into the, priest group. I think that's what they called it, was the priest group, but they're going to focus
Yeah.
mostly on just cleric instead of the
Okay.
entire group like they did for the
Yeah.
experts.
Honestly, they should just
Oh,
aspect each UA. It'll make it way cleaner.
Yeah. So it seems like they're gonna the UA is gonna include one class and then a few other things maybe.
Yeah, which
Mhm.
which
And
is plenty fine.
the other big takeaway, what that Jeremy Crawford said in this to me was just because they haven't mentioned something yet doesn't mean it's coming out of the game or they're
Yeah.
trying to get rid of it. Like the big thing was Jeremy, because there was a lot of questions. Jeremy Crawford mentioned we haven't gotten rid of Eldritch Blast. We're just waiting until the mage section when we talk about warlocks to show what we want to do with it.
Yeah, I think it should be more utilitarian and less just I blast everything, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of what they're going to is like they're cutting it down so it's going to be easy. My guess is they've gotten a lot less responses for the second one due to the size,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's
Yeah,
probably something they're looking at. But like
it was a massive document.
for me though,
Yeah.
looking at listening to this video, I'm gonna do the third one.
Yep,
No
absolutely.
question. I'm gonna make time, and well, I shouldn't say that. Like my intention is to make time and do it. Something could happen that means I can't, but I have the full intention to go through it and do this because
Yeah.
they're showing that yes, we're listening. This is what we're doing with what you're saying, and that is a great move by them,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because maybe it's just me, maybe it's some other people that are like me, but that's like cool. I'm motivated now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially I like this idea of more weapon choices and different things you can do with weapons for the fighters.
Yeah. Yeah. Having
Yeah.
different having almost like different tools for your actions is a good way to go. Adding versatility and more fun options.
I really want to see what they do with marshals and
Mm-hmm.
one D&D. I have a lot of thoughts, and they are not really organized in any particular way, but I have a lot of thoughts, and I'm really hoping that they do a lot for marshals in the next iteration of D&D.
Yeah.
It seems like they have plans. We'll see what those plans are, but there's definitely plans. So I think they've heard the rumblings or have the same rumblings themselves, and we'll see where it goes. But I think that's gonna fill us out for today. So any parting thoughts, Don or Brian?
I don't know. What do you think, Brian?
Talked about summon.
Yeah, you said something, and I had something to say, and it just gone.
I'll give you a little time to think, and maybe it'll pop back in if it does jump in. But we started today talking a little bit about summons and talking about our GM roundtable blog that's going to be hosted on the Brian's Bjark the Blar. Wow, Bjark the Bard. Did you do that on purpose? I have to ask. Did you do that on purpose?
Somebody pointed that out. They were like, you picked a name that is the most difficult to say, and I was like, I'm really sorry. It was a D&D character. It really stood out to me, and I just he was Bjark. He was a bard. He was wonderful, and I was like, you know what? That's going to be the name of my blog. That's what I'm going to use.
But yeah, we should probably wrap it up.
The roundtable will be hosted on there for a little while. If it becomes a big enough thing, it might have its own, blog host or whatever. But Brian agreed to kind of host it and do some layout to see where it goes, and I'm really excited about that. See where it goes and what happens down the line. I'm excited for the first one to come out. So if you see it, give us feedback, good, bad. I do not care.
Yep.
If you have ideas about things to talk about, please throw that in too.
Yeah. I wrote some stuff, but I'm gonna give a lot of credit to the editors.
We have people who have editing experience going through and editing for us too, to make sure things stay on topic and flow. And our goal is to keep it short and readable, so it doesn't take you a long time to get through it.
Yeah, and that's really the battle, is going into enough detail but not going into too much detail that you get lost in the weeds and your readers kind of go, where were they going?
The eyes gloss over because it's been they've been reading for too long. And but yeah, we're really excited about that and see where that takes us. We went into a little bit of a rant discussion on safety tools and how important they are to the game, and those people that don't use them or think they're pointless just don't get it.
Yep. You are not wrong.
And wrapped up with a little 1D&D discussion, which the next UA appears to be ready to drop tomorrow.
Yeah. I had plans this weekend, I think.
Well, the good news is they give a lot of time before they ask for the survey, so there's time to go through and read it and kind of think about it and see. But yeah, so thanks for sticking with us this long if you have, or joining us for whatever part in time you did. Join us if you're watching this. If you're watching this on demand, it's been on Twitch for 7 days, and then it'll be over on YouTube. If you have ideas for things you want us to talk about in the future, drop a comment.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely. We will do it. We just kind of let this thing flow and go. I think honestly, they can both tell you this is the first time I gave them topics before we came on the air. Really? Usually it's, we're sitting there pre-prepping. I'm like, okay, here's what we're going to go over this time. But, I gave them a little heads up because I knew I might need someone to pump the brakes on me.
Brian, I did want to know if you were interested in, maybe we were talking about doing another thing called Hack and Slash, where we take like an SRD and hack together a different game out of that SRD over the course of a couple of hours. We just listen to chat and we sit there and tweak on some rules and discuss how they would impact a specific setting in game.
Yeah, I think that could be fun.
I was gonna do it on Sunday, but then, or no, last Wednesday. But Thanksgiving happened, and I was cleaning and cooking, and too much. But yeah, it was definitely something I was thinking about doing if we had spare time.
Yeah, I like that idea. Could be a lot of fun.
All right, so stay tuned for that. Also, next Wednesday, Don and I are going to do a year in review of all of the different games and systems we have hosted on our channel.
Yep.
And we are going to kind of talk about what we think about them, kind of give them a rating from either a game, a good game, or a damn good game.
We had to go with the cheese. We just did. Cheesy is fun.
If you've watched any of those games or you're interested to see like further thoughts from us about them, tune in for that. That's all it's going to be next Wednesday, same time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. And we're gonna be going over it. We're gonna have some thoughts and opinions from different players that they've submitted to us that have played in the games with us as well. And yeah, if you've got any thoughts or opinions on any ones you've watched, like send them to us and we'll include that in the review, because one of the reasons we do this is to highlight these games and creators, and we give them our feedback off screen sometimes depending on time constraints. And that's what they want. They want this feedback to improve what they're doing and to make it the best it can be.
Exactly.
All right. Now it's time for your last thoughts. If it came back to you, Brian.
It did not.
Ninjas.
Yes, there we go.
And pirates. The Eternal
Ninjas,
War.
pirates. Enjoy December.
Yeah. Stay safe, folks.
Yeah. I think everybody's going to have a more limited schedule in December.
And out of game. Stay safe.
Yes.
In our neck of the woods, winter is very, very dangerous.
So when
yesterday there were over 100 accidents in the nearby town.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
People just need to learn.
A couple of them were critical.
Slow down in
mind
the
you,
snow.
This town has 30,000 people when the college is in.
Slow down in the snow.
Yeah.
That is the big takeaway.
Yep, absolutely.
And just in case someone missed it, I don't know if it was on purpose, but I'm going to assume it's not. Don, told you to stay safe, and we talked about safety tools.
Exactly. Both in and out of game. Stay safe.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks, Brian, for joining us as always. We'll be back with another Random Encounters at the end of December, where we'll definitely talk a little 1D&D UA and see what else pops up that time around.
Oh, I'm sure there'll be plenty. Maybe even Twitter will implode.
That's maybe we'll find out. I'm looking into the Mastodon thing this weekend.
Next week's episode of DGG.
Well, I know I said we're done, but if Elon doesn't submit to the EU, our European friends might not have Twitter, so I gotta go somewhere else to keep in touch.
Yep. All right, folks.
All right.
With that said, stay legendary. And all that fun stuff.
Yes.
All that fun stuffs.
Yeah. Peace.
Oh, yeah. Jesse said, I hear Hive is a happening place, but I saw somebody on Twitter just post